They say the devil doesn't fall in love. He takes what he wants, burns what he doesn't, and walks away without looking back. But what happens when the devil meets someone who doesn't burn? What happens when he finds someone who looks him in the eye and sees not a monster, but a man? This is the story of a woman who crossed an ocean for a fresh start, and a man who controlled an empire built on fear. He loved her perfectly. He loved her completely. Until the bodies began to surface. Her name was Maya Brooks, and she wasn't supposed to be in Seoul at all. She was supposed to be in New York, climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious consulting firm, living the life her parents had imagined for her since she was a little girl with big dreams and even bigger ambitions. But life has a way of rewriting plans, doesn't it? After a devastating breakup and a promotion that fell through because of office politics she refused to play, Maya decided to take the international transfer no one else wanted. Seoul. A city she'd never visited, in a country where she didn't speak the language, doing work that would challenge every skill she'd ever developed. Her friends thought she was running away. Maybe she was. But she preferred to think of it as running toward something new. The first time she saw him, she didn't know who he was. How could she? She'd only been in Seoul for 3 weeks, barely knew how to navigate the subway system, and was still getting used to the way people stared at her rich brown skin, her thick curls, her height. She'd walked into the hotel lobby after a particularly brutal day of meetings, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her mind already planning the bubble bath and glass of wine waiting in her room. The lobby was all glass and gold, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. She was heading toward the elevators when she felt it. That prickle on the back of your neck when someone is watching you. Not just looking. Watching. She turned her head slightly, trying to be subtle, and that's when she saw him. He was standing near the far wall, surrounded by men in dark suits who looked like they could break bones without breaking a sweat. But he was the one you couldn't look away from. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with sharp features that seemed carved from stone and eyes so dark they were almost black. He wore a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary, and he held himself with the kind of stillness that suggested coiled power. He was looking directly at her. Not with curiosity. Not with attraction. With something else. Something that made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with desire and everything to do with instinct. She should have looked away. Any sensible person would have. But Maya had never been particularly sensible, so she looked right back at him. Held his gaze. Raised one eyebrow as if to say, "Can I help you?" For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or amusement. Then one of the men beside him leaned in and whispered something, and just like that, the spell broke. He turned away, and Maya continued to the elevator, her heart pounding in a way she couldn't quite explain. She didn't know that the man she'd just locked eyes with was Kang Minho. She didn't know that his name was whispered in certain circles with the kind of reverence reserved for gods and tyrants. She didn't know that he controlled half the underground business in Seoul, that his family had built an empire on blood and loyalty, that people who crossed him had a tendency to disappear. She didn't know any of that. All she knew was that she'd felt something in that moment. Something dangerous. The second time she saw him was different. It was at a charity gala her company had insisted she attend, one of those glittering affairs where business deals were made over champagne and canapés, where everyone smiled and no one meant it. Maya had worn a dress the color of midnight, something that made her skin glow and her confidence soar. She'd been making small talk with a potential client when she felt that same prickle again. That awareness. She turned, and there he was, across the room, watching her with the same intensity as before. This time, he didn't look away. This time, he walked toward her. And Maya, against every instinct screaming at her to be careful, stayed exactly where she was. "You're the American consultant everyone's been talking about," he said when he reached her. His English was perfect, accented but smooth, his voice deep and controlled. "Maya Brooks. And you are?" she asked, even though something in her gut already knew this wasn't going to be a simple introduction. "Kang Minho." He extended his hand, and when she took it, his grip was firm but not aggressive. His hand was warm. I own several businesses in the city. Several businesses. That's how men like him talked about empires, wasn't it? With understatement. With careful words that revealed nothing and everything at once. What kind of businesses? She asked, because Maya had never been good at pretending she didn't see what was right in front of her. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. The kind that require discretion. So, the kind I should probably stay away from. Probably. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. But you won't. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the quiet confidence of a man who was used to being right. And the truly infuriating thing was that he was right. Maya had always been drawn to things that were bad for her. Spicy food that made her cry. Roller coasters that made her scream. Men who made her heart race for all the wrong reasons. But this felt different. This felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and wondering what it would feel like to jump. They talked for 20 minutes, maybe 30. About Seoul, about her work, about nothing important and everything that mattered. He was intelligent, that much was clear. Sharp in a way that made her sit up straighter, choose her words more carefully. He asked questions that actually listened to the answers, that built on what she said rather than waiting for his turn to talk. And beneath the careful politeness, beneath the expensive suit and controlled expressions, she caught glimpses of something else. Something almost lonely. When he finally excused himself, promising they would see each other again, Maya felt oddly disappointed. She watched him disappear into the crowd, surrounded once again by those silent men in dark suits, and she wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. The answer came sooner than she expected. He sent flowers to her office the next day. Not roses, which would have been too obvious, too romantic. Orchids. White and purple, arranged in a way that looked effortless but probably cost a fortune. The card said simply, "Dinner? M." No explanation, no apology for the presumption, just an invitation that felt more like a challenge. Maya stared at that card for a full 5 minutes, her practical mind warring with her impulsive heart. Every rational thought told her to throw the flowers away, to ignore the invitation, to stay far away from a man whose very presence screamed danger. But Maya had crossed an ocean to start over, to take risks, to live a life that felt like hers. So she picked up her phone and texted the number included on the card. When and where? His reply came immediately. Tonight. I'll send a car. That's how it started. With flowers and a car that was probably worth more than her apartment, driven by a man who didn't speak but radiated the same quiet menace as the others she'd seen around Minho. The restaurant was in a part of the city Maya had never been to, up a private elevator that required a key, into a space that overlooked the glittering sprawl of Seoul like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. Minho was already there, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his silhouette dark against the city lights. When he turned to face her, something in his expression shifted. Softened, just barely. You came. You sent a very persuasive car, she said, letting him take her coat, trying not to notice the way his fingers brushed her shoulders. Dinner was unexpected. She'd expected arrogance, maybe. Expected him to dominate the conversation, to try to impress her with his wealth or his power. But instead, he asked about her life. Really asked. Wanted to know about growing up in Atlanta, about her family, about what made her decide to leave everything familiar behind. And slowly, carefully, he began to share pieces of himself too. Small things at first. The way he took his coffee. His favorite time of day. The fact that he'd studied in London for 2 years and hated every minute of it. Why did you stay if you hated it? Maya asked, watching the way candlelight caught in his dark eyes. Because leaving would have been seen as weakness, he said simply. And weakness is not something my family tolerates. There it was. The first real crack in the armor. She wanted to ask more, wanted to push, but something about the way his jaw tightened told her to wait. So instead, she told him about her own family, about parents who'd worked 3 jobs to send her to college, about a little brother who was convinced she was going to take over the world someday. "And are you?" Minho asked. "Going to take over the world?" "I'm working on it," she said with a smile. "One consulting project at a time." He laughed. Actually laughed. It was a rusty sound, like something that didn't get used often enough, and it transformed his entire face. Made him look younger. Human. Dangerous in an entirely different way. They started seeing each other after that. Not dating, exactly. Maya wasn't sure what to call it. He would text her at odd hours, asking if she was free, and somehow she always was. They went to restaurants that didn't advertise, to private clubs where everyone seemed to know him and no one dared approach. He took her to a traditional tea house where they sat on floor cushions and he taught her the proper way to hold the cup. To a contemporary art gallery after hours, where they wandered through empty rooms and argued about the meaning of abstract paintings. To a jazz club in Itaewon where the music was so good it made her chest ache. And slowly, carefully, she began to understand who he really was. It wasn't one conversation. It was 100 small moments. The way people's eyes widened when they saw him. The deference in their voices. The men who were always nearby, always watching. The phone calls he would step away to take, his voice dropping to that cold, authoritative tone that made her shiver. The scars she felt under her fingers when they finally kissed, really kissed, in the back of his car after a late dinner. Small marks on his ribs, his shoulder. Evidence of a life lived in violence. "You're scared," he said one night, his forehead pressed against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "Yes," she admitted, because lying seemed pointless. "Of me. Of what being with you might mean." He pulled back slightly, his dark eyes searching hers. "I would never hurt you, Maya. Never." "I know," she said. And the terrifying thing was, she meant it. She believed him. This man who probably had blood on his hands, who controlled an empire built on fear and loyalty, who could end lives with a phone call. She believed he would never hurt her. "But I'm not just scared of you hurting me. I'm scared of what you might have to do to protect me. I'm scared of who you have to be when you're not with me." Something in his expression cracked. For just a moment, she saw the weight he carried. The loneliness. The burden of being Kang Minho, of being the heir to a legacy he never asked for, of being the kind of man who couldn't afford weakness or softness or love. "I didn't choose this life," he said quietly. "It chose me. And now I'm choosing you." Those words should have terrified her. They should have sent her running back to her safe apartment, back to her predictable consulting work, back to a life that made sense. Instead, they made her pull him closer. Made her kiss him like she was drowning and he was air. Made her decide, in that moment, that some risks were worth taking. But here's what Maya didn't know, couldn't know, as she fell deeper into Kang Minho's carefully controlled world. Here's what he kept hidden behind those dark eyes and that perfect composure. The bodies were already there. Buried deep. Waiting. And soon, very soon, they would begin to surface. The first one appeared on a Tuesday. Maya was in a meeting when her phone buzzed with a news alert. A body had been found in the Han River, badly decomposed, identified as a mid-level member of a rival organization. The kind of thing that happened sometimes in a city this size, tragic but not personal. She deleted the notification and went back to her presentation, not knowing that the dead man's name would haunt her nightmares in the weeks to come. The second body was found 3 days later. This time in Gangnam, in an alley behind a luxury shopping district Maya had walked through just the weekend before. Another gang member. Another execution-style killing. The news started paying attention. Started asking questions about gang violence, about territory disputes, about the organizations that operated in Seoul's shadows. Minho didn't mention it. When they had dinner that Friday, he was the same as always. Attentive. Careful. Present in a way that made her feel like the only person in the world. They talked about her upcoming project, about his plans to expand one of his legitimate businesses, about nothing and everything. He kissed her goodnight in the car, his hand gentle on her cheek, his eyes soft in the dim light. "I'll see you tomorrow," he promised. And she believed him. The third body changed everything. Because the third body wasn't a gang member. It was a journalist. A woman who'd been investigating organized crime in Seoul, who'd been asking uncomfortable questions, getting too close to uncomfortable truths. She was found in her apartment, and while the police called it a suicide, anyone paying attention could see it for what it was. A message. A warning. Maya saw Minho's face on the news that night. Not connected to the murder, not directly. But there, in the background of footage from some business event, his expression cold and controlled, surrounded by those ever-present men in dark suits. And for the first time, she let herself really think about what he was. About what he did. About the price of the empire he controlled. She didn't call him that night. Didn't respond to his texts. She needed to think, needed to breathe, needed to figure out what the hell she was doing. But Minho wasn't the kind of man who waited patiently when something was wrong. He showed up at her apartment at midnight, still in his suit, his face tight with concern. "What happened?" he asked when she opened the door. "Why are you pulling away?" "A woman died, Minho." "A lot of people die, Maya." "That's not an answer." She stared at him, this man she'd fallen for, this man who looked at her like she was precious and rare and worth protecting. "Did you kill her?" The question hung between them, sharp and terrible. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, slowly, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "No. I didn't kill her. But you know who did." His silence was answer enough. "Why?" Maya asked, her voice breaking despite her efforts to stay calm. Why would someone kill a journalist? Because she was asking questions that would have gotten a lot of people killed, Minho said quietly. "Not just people in my world. Innocent people. Families." She was going to publish information that would have started a war, Maya. A real war, in the streets of this city. So murder was the answer. "I didn't say it was right." He ran a hand through his hair, the first time she'd seen him genuinely agitated. "I said that's what happened. This is the world I live in, Maya. This is what I've been trying to protect you from. You can't protect me from reality, Minho." "I can try." She wanted to be angry. Wanted to feel righteously furious, morally superior, certain that she needed to walk away. But life isn't that simple, is it? Love isn't that simple. She looked at this man standing in her tiny Seoul apartment, this man who controlled an empire of violence and fear, and she saw the truth. He was trapped. Trapped by loyalty and legacy and choices made long before he was born. And he was terrified. Not of death or violence or rival gangs. But of losing her. "I need you to be honest with me," she said finally. "About everything. No more secrets, no more careful omissions. If we're going to do this, really do this, I need to know who you are. If I tell you everything," he said slowly, "you'll leave. You should leave. Let me make that decision for myself." So he told her. They sat on her small couch, in her modest apartment that was nothing like the luxury spaces they usually occupied, and he told her everything. About his family, about the organization his grandfather had built in the chaos after the Korean War. About growing up knowing he was destined to take over, to carry on a legacy written in blood and loyalty. About the things he'd done, the orders he'd given, the weight of carrying power that could destroy lives with a word. He told her about rivals and alliances, about the careful balance that kept the city from descending into open warfare. About the legitimate businesses that laundered money and the illegal operations that funded everything else. And Maya listened. Really listened. Not to judge, not to condemn, but to understand. Because that's what love is, isn't it? Not looking away from the darkness, but seeing it clearly and choosing anyway. When he finished, when there were no more secrets between them, she took his hand. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Maya." I'm not saying I approve of everything you've done. I'm not saying this is easy or simple or right. But I'm saying I see you, Kang Minho. Not the boss, not the heir, not the devil everyone's afraid of. I see you. And I'm choosing to stay. The look on his face in that moment, like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing, like she'd just given him something he'd thought was impossible, that look was something she'd remember for the rest of her life. But loving him, choosing him, didn't make the bodies stop appearing. If anything, things got worse. 2 more bodies surfaced in the following weeks, both connected to a rival organization that was making moves into territory Minho's family controlled. The news was relentless, the police were under pressure, and everyone in Seoul's underworld was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Maya's colleagues at work started asking questions. Why was she seen with Kang Minho? Did she know what he really did? Was she aware of the investigations, the rumors, the danger? Her boss called her into his office, concerned about the company's reputation, about potential liability. She deflected, promised it wasn't serious, promised she was being careful. But inside, she was terrified. Not of Minho. Never of Minho. But of the world closing in around them. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. They were supposed to have dinner, a quiet evening at one of their usual places. But when Minho's car picked her up, the driver took a different route. They ended up at Minho's private residence, a penthouse she'd never been to before, all glass walls and minimalist design and a view that stretched across the entire city. Minho was standing by the windows when she arrived, his posture tense in a way she'd never seen before. "We need to talk," he said without turning around. Those 4 words. The ones that always mean something is about to change, about to break, about to end. "Okay," Maya said carefully, setting down her bag. He turned to face her, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. The struggle between what he wanted and what he thought was right. "You need to go back to America." Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't it. "What?" "Things are escalating. The war I told you about, the one that journalist was trying to prevent. It's coming anyway. And when it does, anyone connected to me will be a target. So we'll be careful." "Careful isn't enough." The words came out sharp, almost angry. "You don't understand what these people are capable of, Maya. What they'll do to hurt me. You've become a vulnerability, and in my world, vulnerabilities get exploited." She walked toward him slowly, watching the way he tensed as she approached, like he was bracing for impact. "So your solution is to send me away? To end this?" "My solution is to keep you alive." His voice cracked, just slightly. "I can handle losing almost anything. But I can't handle them hurting you because of me." Maya reached up and cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "You don't get to make this decision alone. You don't get to decide what risks I'm willing to take. Maya, I love you." She said it clearly, firmly, no room for doubt. "I love you, Kang Minho. And I'm not going anywhere." It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. The first time they'd named this thing between them for what it really was. And she watched him break. Watched the control shatter, the careful composure crack wide open. He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair, held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the world. "I love you too," he whispered. "God help me, I love you too." They made love that night with a desperation that felt like goodbye, even though neither of them was ready to let go. Afterward, lying tangled together in his enormous bed, Maya traced the scars on his skin and listened to him talk about a future he'd never let himself imagine before. Small things. Simple things. Morning coffee together. Weekends away from the city. A life that wasn't defined by violence and fear. "Can we really have that?" she asked quietly. "Can you really walk away from all of this?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I want to try." That conversation, that promise, that tiny spark of hope, it was everything. It was enough to make them both believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way through this. That love could be stronger than legacy, than loyalty, than all the blood that had been spilled in the name of family and power. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing, doesn't it? The next body that surfaced wasn't connected to rival gangs or territorial disputes or power struggles. The next body was connected directly to Kang Minho. And when the police started asking questions, when they started connecting dots that had been carefully disconnected for years, everything began to unravel. It started with a phone call at 3 in the morning. Maya woke to the sound of Minho's phone buzzing insistently, watched him answer with a clipped voice, saw his expression go cold and hard in a way that made her stomach drop. "What is it?" she asked when he hung up. They found Lee Jae-sung. The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it, like he was pronouncing a death sentence, told her everything she needed to know. Who is he? Who he was. Minho was already getting dressed, his movements sharp and efficient. He was my father's right hand. Disappeared 5 years ago after he tried to stage a coup against my family. Everyone assumed he'd fled the country. But he didn't. No. He's been in the ground. And now someone's dug him up. Maya sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. Why would someone do that? Minho looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw something like fear in his eyes. To implicate me. To give the police what they need to finally move against my family. Did you? She couldn't finish the question. Kill him? Minho's laugh was bitter. No. My father did. I just helped bury the body. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible. This was what she'd signed up for, wasn't it? This was the reality of loving a man like Kang Minho. Not the romantic dinners or the luxury or the way he looked at her like she was his whole world. This. Bodies in the ground. Secrets that could destroy everything. What happens now? She asked. Now I deal with it. He finished buttoning his shirt, his face a mask of control once again. Stay here. Don't leave the building. I'll have security posted outside. Minho. Please, Maya. He came back to the bed, cupped her face in his hands. Please just stay safe. Let me handle this. She wanted to argue. Wanted to insist she could help, could be there for him. But she also knew that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is trust the person you love to do what they need to do. So she nodded, kissed him once more, and watched him leave. The hours that followed were the longest of Maya's life. She paced the penthouse like a caged animal, watching news alerts pile up on her phone. The discovery of Lee Jae-sung's body was everywhere. The police were calling it a major breakthrough in their investigation of organized crime. They were promising arrests, promising justice, promising to clean up the city's underworld once and for all. And Maya knew, with sickening certainty, that they were coming for Minho. She called him twice, but both times it went to voicemail. She texted him, got no response. By noon, she was seriously considering breaking her promise and leaving the penthouse, consequences be damned. But then one of Minho's men appeared at the door. Young, professional, with the same watchful eyes they all had. Miss Brooks, he said in careful English. Mr. Kang asked me to bring you something. He handed her a sealed envelope. Maya's hands shook slightly as she opened it, unfolding a handwritten letter. Minho's handwriting was neat, controlled, each character precise. Maya. By the time you read this, I'll be in police custody. They're coming for me today, and I won't run. Running would only make things worse, would put you and everyone else I care about in more danger. I need you to listen carefully. There's a lawyer named Park Sun-mi. Her number is at the bottom of this page. Call her. She'll help you navigate what comes next, help protect you from the fallout of all this. I also need you to know that I've arranged for your protection. The men watching over you now will continue to do so until this is resolved. Don't fight them on this. Please. I wish I could tell you this will all be fine, that I'll walk out of that police station and come back to you. But I've never lied to you, and I won't start now. The evidence they have is substantial. The charges will be serious. And I honestly don't know if I'll be able to walk away from this. What I do know is that loving you has been the best thing I've ever done. You made me believe I could be more than what my family made me. You made me want to be better. Even if this is where it ends, even if I spend the rest of my life in prison, I won't regret a single moment we had together. Be strong, Maya. Go back to your life, your work, your dreams. Don't let what happens to me define your future. I love you. Always. M. Maya read the letter 3 times, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. This couldn't be how it ended. After everything they'd been through, after every choice she'd made to stay with him despite the danger, despite the fear, despite everything logic told her to do, this couldn't be the ending. She called the lawyer. Park Sun-mi answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Yes, she was aware of the situation. Yes, she was already working on Minho's case. No, there wasn't anything Maya could do right now except stay safe and trust that they were doing everything possible. He cares about you very much, the lawyer said, her tone softening slightly. That's why he's being so careful to keep you separate from all of this. I don't want to be separate, Maya said. I want to be there for him. Then be patient. Let us do our jobs. And when the time comes, be ready to stand beside him, no matter what that means. The arrest made international news. Kang Minho, heir to one of Seoul's most powerful organized crime families, taken into custody on charges ranging from illegal weapons trafficking to accessory to murder. The footage showed him being led out of his office building in handcuffs, his face expressionless, surrounded by police and cameras and chaos. Maya watched it on the news and felt something break inside her chest. The next few weeks were a nightmare. The media descended on everyone connected to Minho, including Maya. Her face ended up in newspapers and online articles, identified as the American girlfriend of alleged crime boss Kang Minho. Her company put her on immediate leave, citing the need to distance themselves from the scandal. Her parents called from Atlanta, terrified and confused, demanding she come home immediately. But Maya stayed. She stayed because she'd promised herself she would see this through. Because walking away now would mean everything they'd been through together meant nothing. Because love isn't just about the good times, the romantic dinners and the luxury and the perfect moments. Love is about standing firm when everything falls apart. Park Sun-mi called her a week after Minho's arrest. He wants to see you, she said. I've arranged a visitation for tomorrow afternoon. Walking into that prison was one of the hardest things Maya had ever done. The guards searched her bag, scanned her with metal detectors, looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. She was led through sterile hallways to a small visiting room with plastic chairs and a table bolted to the floor. And then he was there. Minho looked smaller somehow, diminished by the prison clothes and the harsh fluorescent lighting. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before, a tension in his shoulders that spoke of sleepless nights and constant vigilance. But when he saw her, when their eyes met across that small room, his whole face transformed. You shouldn't have come, were his first words. Too bad, she said, sitting down across from him. I'm here anyway. They couldn't touch. The guards made that very clear. But they sat as close as they were allowed, and Maya told him everything. About the media circus, about her company's cowardice, about her parents' concern and her own determination to see this through. And Minho listened, really listened, the way he always had. You should go home, Maya, he said when she finished. Back to America. Start over. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment I fell in love with you. She leaned forward, wishing she could take his hand. I'm not leaving you, Minho. Not now, not ever. Whatever happens, we face it together. Something in his expression crumbled. I don't deserve you. Probably not, she agreed with a small smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. They talked for the full hour they were allowed, about everything and nothing. About the case, which wasn't looking good. About the lawyer's strategy, which involved trying to separate Minho's legitimate business dealings from his family's illegal operations. About the possibility of a plea deal that might reduce his sentence if he cooperated with investigators. "I won't turn on my family," Minho said flatly. "No matter what they offer. Even if it means decades in prison. Even then. Loyalty is the only currency that matters in my world, Maya. If I break that, I might as well be dead." She understood. Hated it, but understood it. This was who he was. A man shaped by codes of honor she'd never fully comprehend, bound by loyalties that ran deeper than love or self-preservation. And she loved him anyway. Maybe even more because of it. The visits became a routine. Every week, sometimes twice a week, Maya would make the journey to the prison. They would sit across from each other in that sterile room and talk about their lives, their hopes, their fears. She told him about job searching, about the way her colleagues had turned their backs on her, about slowly rebuilding a life that made sense. He told her about prison politics, about the way even in here his family's reputation preceded him, about the strange peace he'd found in accepting his fate. "I'm thinking about writing a book," she told him one day, several months into his incarceration. About what? About love. About choices. About a woman who fell for the wrong man and decided he was right anyway. Minho smiled, that rare, genuine smile that made him look years younger. "That sounds like a bestseller. Or a cautionary tale. Maybe both." The trial started 10 months after his arrest. Maya was there every single day, sitting in the gallery, watching lawyers argue over evidence and witnesses testify about things she wished she could unhear. She watched Minho sit stone-faced through testimony about murders and extortion and violence that painted him as a monster. She watched the prosecution build their case brick by brick, creating a picture of a man who'd chosen crime over conscience, power over principle. But she also watched the moments in between. The way Minho's eyes would find hers during breaks, seeking reassurance. The small notes his lawyer would pass him that made his shoulders relax slightly. The tiny glimpses of humanity beneath the defendant's mask. The prosecution's case was strong. Damning, really. They had witnesses, they had evidence, they had a paper trail that connected Minho to nearly every major crime his family had committed in the past decade. But Park Sun-mi was brilliant. She poked holes in witness testimony, challenged the chain of custody on evidence, argued that Minho had been a figurehead more than an active participant, groomed from birth to take over an empire he'd never truly controlled. And then came the moment that changed everything. A witness for the prosecution, a former member of Minho's organization, took the stand and started testifying about a meeting where Minho had allegedly ordered a hit on a rival gang member. But as the prosecutor questioned him, the witness's story started falling apart. Details didn't match previous statements. Timelines didn't align. And finally, under cross-examination from Park Sun-mi, he broke down and admitted he'd been coerced by the police to embellish his testimony. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. And Maya watched hope flicker across Minho's face for the first time in months. From there, the prosecution's case began to unravel. Other witnesses recanted or contradicted each other. Evidence that had seemed ironclad revealed gaps and inconsistencies. And while Minho was far from innocent, while there were still charges that would stick, the picture that emerged was more complicated than the prosecution had painted. A man trapped by legacy. A son trying to honor his family while minimizing harm. Someone who'd made terrible choices but was not the monster they'd claimed. The verdict came on a grey Tuesday in March. Guilty on some counts. Not guilty on others. A sentence of 8 years, with possibility of parole after 5 for good behavior. It wasn't freedom. But it also wasn't the life sentence the prosecution had been seeking. Maya was there when they read the verdict. She watched Minho's face remain impassive, watched him nod slightly as if he'd expected this outcome. And when they led him away, when the guards moved to take him back to his cell, he turned and looked at her one more time. Mouthed 3 words. "I love you." She mouthed them back. and meant them with every fiber of her being. 5 years. That's what the lawyers thought he'd actually serve if everything went according to plan. 5 years of visits in sterile rooms. 5 years of phone calls that cut off after 15 minutes. 5 years of missing him with an ache that never quite faded. Maya threw herself into building a new life. She couldn't work in consulting anymore, not in Seoul, not with the scandal still fresh. So she did something she'd always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue. She started writing. That book she'd mentioned to Minho became real, became a novel about love and loyalty and the impossible choices we make for the people we care about. It was fiction, carefully disguised, but anyone who knew her story would recognize the truth beneath the made-up names. The book sold. Not bestseller numbers, but enough that publishers wanted more. Enough that she could support herself doing something she actually loved. She stayed in Seoul, found a small apartment in Hongdae, built a life that was entirely hers. And every week, without fail, she visited Minho. She watched him change over those years. Watched the hardness soften slightly, the control relax. Prison stripped away the luxury and the power and the fearsome reputation, leaving just the man underneath. And Maya fell in love with him all over again. With the person he was becoming when he didn't have to be Kang Minho, heir to an empire. When he could just be Minho. A man who read the books she brought him and discussed them with the same intensity he'd once reserved for business deals. A man who talked about the future with a hope he'd never allowed himself before. When I get out, he said during one visit, I want to be different. Better. You're already better, Maya told him. No. I mean really different. I've been thinking about what my lawyer said during the trial. About how I never really had a choice in the life I lived. But now I do. Now I get to choose. And what are you going to choose? He looked at her with those dark eyes that had first captured her attention in a hotel lobby years ago. You. A quiet life. Something honest. I know it sounds impossible, given who I am and what I've done. But I want to try. Then we'll try together, she promised. When you get out, we'll figure it out together. 4 years and 3 months after his initial sentencing, Minho was granted parole. Maya was there the day he walked out of prison, standing outside the gates in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst. He looked different. Thinner, older, with streaks of grey in his dark hair that hadn't been there before. But when he saw her, when he walked toward her as a free man for the first time in years, his smile was the same. That rare, genuine expression that transformed his entire face. And then he was holding her. Really holding her. His arms around her waist, his face buried in her hair, his whole body shaking slightly with relief and joy and disbelief. They stood like that for a long time, not caring about the cameras that had gathered or the guards watching or the other people coming and going. Just 2 people who'd survived something impossible, together. Hi, she whispered against his chest. Hi, he whispered back. Starting over wasn't easy. Minho's family wanted him back, wanted him to resume his place in the organization. But he'd made his choice. He walked away. Formally, publicly, irrevocably. It caused a rift that might never heal, cost him relationships with people he'd known his whole life. But it also freed him. They left Seoul. Not forever, but for a while. They traveled to places Minho had never been, did normal things like getting lost in foreign cities and arguing over maps and eating street food that made them both sick. They stayed in cheap hotels and expensive ones, watched sunrises from beaches and sunsets from mountains, built a catalogue of memories that belonged to them alone. Eventually they came back. Seoul was home, after all, in a complicated way. But they built a different life there. Minho started a legitimate security consulting business, using everything he knew about protection and risk management to help companies stay safe. Maya continued writing, her second and third books doing even better than the first. They got a place together, something modest and comfortable, nothing like the penthouse or the luxury they'd known before. And slowly, carefully, they built something real. Something that wasn't defined by danger or secrecy or fear. Something simple and honest and theirs. Do you ever regret it? Maya asked him one night, 2 years after his release. They were on their small balcony, watching the Seoul skyline glitter in the distance, sharing a bottle of wine. Regret what? All of it. The choices you made. The price you paid. Minho was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. I regret the people who got hurt. I regret the violence. I regret that I didn't have the courage to walk away sooner. He turned to look at her, his dark eyes soft in the dim light. But I don't regret you. I don't regret us. Everything I went through led me here, to this moment, with you. How could I regret that? Maya leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I love you, she said, because even after everything, after all the time they'd been together, those words still felt important. Still felt necessary. I love you too, he replied. And then, because he was Minho and he'd always been direct, marry me. She pulled back to look at him. What? Marry me, he repeated. I know I can't give you the life you deserve. I know my past will always complicate things. But I want to spend whatever future I have with you. Officially. Completely. So marry me, Maya Brooks. There were 1,000 practical reasons to say no. 1,000 ways this could complicate her life, her career, her carefully rebuilt reputation. But Maya had never been particularly practical, had she? That's how she'd ended up in Seoul in the first place. That's how she'd ended up falling for a man everyone said she should fear. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. They got married 6 months later. Nothing big, nothing flashy. Just a small ceremony at a traditional hanok with a handful of friends and Maya's family who'd flown in from Atlanta. Her mother cried. Her father shook Minho's hand and told him that he'd better take care of his daughter or answer to him. Minho promised he would, and Maya could see that he meant it. The bodies had stopped surfacing long ago. The empire Minho had walked away from continued without him, run by cousins and former associates who'd filled the void he'd left. Sometimes Maya wondered about that life, about the man Minho had been before she met him. But mostly she focused on the man he was now. The one who made her coffee every morning. The one who read her manuscript drafts and gave honest feedback. The one who sometimes woke up from nightmares about his time in prison and needed her to remind him he was safe, he was free, he was home. Their life wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. But it was theirs. Built on choices they'd made together, on love that had survived impossible odds, on the simple truth that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose someone and keep choosing them, every single day. So if you're listening to this story and wondering if love can really survive something like this, if someone can really change, if happy endings are possible even when the odds are stacked against you, I'm here to tell you that sometimes, against all logic and reason, they are. Sometimes the devil falls in love. Sometimes the devil becomes human. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, you get to be the person who helps him remember how. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Through the luxury and the danger, through the prison visits and the hope, through every complicated moment of Maya and Minho's story. If this tale touched your heart, if it made you believe in love that defies expectations, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and let me know you were here. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about love that crosses cultures and defies odds, about people who choose each other despite every reason not to, about the beautiful, complicated, impossible ways hearts can find each other, please subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything, and it's what keeps these stories coming. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever made a choice for love that everyone said was impossible? Have you ever stood by someone when the world said you shouldn't? Share your story. Let's build a community of people who believe that love, real love, is always worth fighting for. Until next time, keep believing in love stories that defy expectations. Keep choosing the people who make you brave enough to leap. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful endings come from the most unexpected beginnings.